A hot stove is barely at a simmer, but still lots of news to talk about. Welcome in Chatterbox Reds, joined by Nick Kirby. I'm Craig Sandlin. Appreciate you joining us and tuning in on this glorious Friday morning after a thrilling Thursday night football game. Let me just tell you, Nick, had a lot of fun watching that barn burner. Hope you had a good day yesterday. Everything good?
Hey, I won a bet on the Thursday night football game, so I'm doing well. I don't remember what it was, but I won it.
Wasn't on ESPN bet, I'm sure.
It was not. It was not on ESPN bet. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. All right, let's get into it, Nick. Let's start with some roster moves. Obviously, free agency began on Thursday evening. Reds, no announcement of any major signings that we need to go over, but a bevy of roster moves that are worth talking about. We talked about it during the season as we were kind of gearing up for this offseason. There's no such thing as a 60-day injured list in the offseason. So the Reds went through, reinstated from the 60-day injured list, starting pitcher Julian Aguiar, outfielder Tyler Callihan, pitcher Rhett Lowder, Carson Spiers, and Brandon Williamson. They also outrighted to AAA pitcher Sam Ben-Shooter, selected the AAA Louisville contract of pitcher Jose Franco, claimed off waivers from the Cardinals Roddery Munoz, a pitcher, and unfortunately Reiver Sanmartin was claimed off of waivers by the Giants. The one that I want to start off with, Nick, and probably the one that not necessarily a surprise, but intriguing to me, I guess, at this point in the offseason was Jose Franco. Selected his contract from AAA. He's now officially on the 40-man roster. Plenty of spots to go around for the 40-man, so maybe not too much to read into this, but still interesting. Jose Franco, a guy that I know a lot of people are growing to be more and more high on after a strong performance over the last year or two.
Yeah, up to 37 spots as it stands now. But, I mean, the Reds are obviously going to add more than 3 players this offseason. That doesn't mean they can't lose more players as well. But, yeah, it was a little surprising they went ahead and just already did it. I don't believe he's going to be the last player that they're going to protect ahead, but they just went ahead and did it now. Not really sure what the reasoning for that is, but a talented pitcher and a pitcher that Reds fans need to know because I believe he will pitch for the Cincinnati Reds in 2026. This is a guy that flew through the Reds system the last 2 years. He had Tommy John surgery. He got hurt in 2022, missed all of 2023. And then 2024, he started in Daytona, and he was at AAA, but not just make a cup of coffee. Pitched 17 games at AAA, pitched pretty well. Might end up being the Reds minor league pitcher of the year. I know Doug Gray at RedsMinorLeagues.com already gave him that honor. I don't think the Reds have officially announced, but this is a guy, Craig, Reds signed for $10,000 out of Venezuela. So shout out to that scout or those scouts or that group that got Franco, because that's looking like a great deal. Fastball averages around 95, can hit about 98. Good spin, good vertical break, about above average spin on his slider, 82 to 87 miles an hour, which does miss a good amount of bats. Nice job of killing spin on his effective 86 to 90 mile per hour changeup. So we'll see. The question is not will Franco get a chance in the big leagues? It's will he be a starter or will he be a reliever? He's going to be a big league pitcher, at least going to get that opportunity at some point. You hope it's a starter because you can never have too much starting pitching depth. But you'll see him, I fully believe, in 2026.
Yeah, another guy probably need to start brushing up on is Roddery Munoz. Reds claimed him off of waivers from the Cardinals on Thursday. What do we need to know about the versatile Munoz?
Well, I wouldn't get too attached to Munoz. Munoz has the absolute kiss of death of a pitcher who gets picked up in an offseason, off waivers, and then ends up not pitching. In fact, it's already happened to him. It happened with the Pirates. He got claimed off waivers 2 off seasons ago, lasted about 15 days, and got DFA'd. So I wouldn't get attached to him. This is a guy that's been in 5 organizations since 2023. He's only pitched in 27 big league games. That was with the Marlins and Cardinals in 2024 and 2025. Now, he was used as a starter pretty much exclusively with the Marlins in 2024. Then in 2025, he was a reliever. Has legit strikeout stuff. He throws hard, but he walks the world, and he has given up a ton. I mean, a ton of homers, 0 MILB options. Does have a really fun windup. Go watch some highlights of him. But this is just another one of those talented arms that the Reds are going to kind of take a shot on. But again, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked. I'm trying to think, who was the guy last year? There was a guy last year that a lot of people got excited about, and he never ended up. He didn't make it through the offseason that they picked up and lost. Munoz could be that guy, but again, this is just, I think, what you're going to see. You're going to see the Reds try to accumulate as many of these type of arms as you can this offseason.
Yeah, well, they did lose one arm, Nick, and a guy that showed out pretty well at the AAA level, didn't get a ton of opportunity at the major league level last year, but Reiver Sanmartin no longer with the club.
Yeah, one of the most likable pitchers I think that the Reds have had in recent memory. To be honest, there was no chance Reiver Sanmartin was surviving the 40-man roster all offseason. Honestly, I was a little surprised he got claimed. I thought the Reds could probably get him through waivers. They got Sam Ben-Schuster through waivers, so I'm kind of surprised it wasn't flipped. Someone didn't take a flyer on Ben-Schuster and went with Reiver Sanmartin. Again, like I said, I don't think he would have made it through the offseason. He's a nice depth arm, but I think that's kind of probably all Reiver is at this point in his career.
Yeah. And then obviously don't want to spend a ton of time on it because I don't think there's a whole lot there, but obviously 5 guys reinstated from the 60-day injured list. Which of those 5 guys do you think we can expect to actually see on the major league roster in 2026?
Well, there's a good chance you see all of them if they survive the offseason. Obviously, Lowder and Williamson are pretty safe. They're gonna the Reds are clearly gonna keep them on the roster. Guy like Spiers, I think, is safe. I think Callihan is probably safe, although it just depends really what his injuries at. Aguiar, I think he showed enough, and just being a starter, he's probably safe. But again, there might be a roster crunch depending on how many players the Reds are able to pick up. So just because they were added or they were taken off the 60-day IL now doesn't necessarily mean they're going to survive the offseason as a whole. Lowder and Williamson exceptions to that. But I think I'd be pretty surprised if any of those guys got cut loose. Callihan probably the one that I could maybe see it if the Reds are able to add multiple offensive pieces.
Well, let's jump ahead. Terry Francona, Nick, appeared on the Reds Hot Stove League podcast recently, and some interesting conversations out of that podcast appearance. Full disclosure, for those of you listening or watching, haven't heard any of this yet. So I'm going to be reacting in live time as you are, if you haven't heard it already. So Nick, this first one, I believe, is about our good friend Chris Valaika.
How can you guys as a group collectively be more consistent offensively?
Well, I do think with Chris Valaika being here for a year, just like I was saying a minute ago, I think that's to our advantage because he gets everybody so well prepared. Some of it sometimes, guys, I think is when you're not at full strength, and it shows. Like when Austin Hayes would be down, and it happened a few times, we weren't really deep enough where we could handle that. So, and again, that's why I keep saying we got to get deeper so we can handle when things come up during the season because they're going to happen.
Yeah, Chris Valaika has been here for a year, Terry, and that first year was quite the year offensively, let me tell you. The one thing that he said that I do agree with is that the depth just wasn't quite there offensively in 2025. But also there were some guys who took significant steps back. And when Nick Krall made the decision to go away from David Bell, one of the major things he talked about was about the young guys not progressing in a way that Nick Krall had hoped that they would. And this feels like a big year for Chris Valaika and this hitting staff because these young guys have to produce. They're going to need a lot out of this young group. They're obviously hopefully going to go out and add pieces, but this group has to step up because a lot of them are still going to be a core piece to the Reds in 2026. So it's an interesting comment for sure. I don't know how much I buy into the whole Valaika thing with the coming in for his second year and how well prepared he makes these guys, because the approach at the plate a lot of times certainly didn't feel like it was well thought out, I guess is the best way to put it, Nick. But Terry loves Chris. I think we know that much. And for better or for worse, he's going to ride or die with Chris Valaika.
I just thought that was an awesome quote, talking about how him coming back for a second year. I thought that would rile some people up. I don't really have a hot take on it. I just thought it was a fun clip. I think the whole Chris Valaika thing is overblown. I care far more about which players are getting at bats than if Chris Valaika is ruining them, because there was guys that hit plenty of home runs last year, and I don't think Chris Valaika really sways that much one way or the other.
All right. Well, they talked about the lack of depth, and that lack of depth led somewhat to what Terry Francona is going to talk about in this next clip, which is TJ Friedl.
With TJ, and again, he probably played too much. Everybody made a big deal out of Ellie playing, but TJ was out of necessity. But I think if we have the ability to rest him a little bit more, he won't get so banged up, and you'll see maybe a little better numbers in the second half.
Okay, can I start on this one?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have the ability to rest him. You didn't have a guy named Will Benson that looked fantastic out in center field every time you threw him out there, that was dying to get on the field. You had to play TJ Friedl every single day and run him into the ground. Come on, Terry.
Yep. Will Benson, Robbie Marte in the second half certainly felt like he could give a breather to TJ Friedl here and there if you needed him to. I think the one thing about TJ Friedl that Terry Francona likely fell in love with early on in the season and didn't adjust to as the season went on was the platoon splits for TJ Friedl not being significant, and the fact that he could hit left-handed pitching, even though that was kind of maybe a false narrative just based on how he was getting those base hits. But Terry fell in love with him, as we know he does. Terry loves to fall in love with his guys, and he plays them until their legs fall off. And hopefully the Reds have a better alternative in 2026 to be able to give TJ Friedl some time off. And I've said it before, I wouldn't be necessarily opposed to TJ Friedl not being your everyday center fielder and maybe being part of a platoon in the outfield and the corners. But his speed certainly took a step back, and maybe it was because he was playing too much, but maybe it's just because he's slower.
In fairness to TJ Friedl, he had his career best on-base percentage, career best walk rate. So TJ Friedl was a valuable player for the Reds. I just don't buy the notion that you couldn't give him an off day when you had Will Benson. I think that's absolutely crazy talk. And yes, I do agree with the splits. In fairness to Tito, I don't necessarily think there was a whole lot of great options to necessarily take the spot of Friedl. In a perfect world, there's no way TJ Friedl should be hitting leadoff against left-handed pitching in 2026. I'll give him a pass in 2025 because of the options that he had. But that should not be the plan going forward.
Well, speaking of not being the plan going forward and guys playing too much, Nick, you heard it there briefly, Terry acknowledging it, but Elly De La Cruz played all 162 games in 2025. A lot of discourse around what his future looks like for the Cincinnati Reds. What did Terry have to say about our favorite shortstop?
You mentioned Elly maybe playing too much. Maybe some off days will do him good. You would know more about that than me. But how do you have him improve defensively? And I know it seemed like it got in his head a little bit. Is he a long-term stay at shortstop? And if he is, how do you make him more consistent defensively?
Well, that's the $100 question. And I think Freddie Benavides is one of the better coaches I've ever been around. And Freddie lives and dies trying to get these guys better. Part of Ellie makes some errors, I think, that can be fixed. I also think with such a long levered guy like Ellie, like every time he throws, he's got to pay attention because he's just got such long arm action, and that's never going to change. But he led the league in errors. That's not one of our goals. So we've got to clean that up, and we're gonna spend a ton of energy on trying to do it. Ellie doesn't shortchange you on effort. That's the one really good thing.
You want to start on this one, or you want me to?
Yeah, I don't. That was a perfectly fine answer to that question. I didn't.
Was it? Because to me, it felt non-committal to Ellie being your shortstop long term. To me, it sounded like he was specifically asked, "Is shortstop in the future for Ellie De La Cruz?" And his response was, "That's the $100 question." That doesn't sound like someone who is committed to Ellie De La Cruz being an everyday shortstop moving forward. Now, maybe he means he's not going to play every day. Maybe he means that he's going to move to the outfield. Maybe he means that he's not going to be on the Cincinnati Reds. I don't know. But that certainly didn't sound like a manager who is committed to what I think is the future star of your franchise, or the current star of your franchise, being your everyday shortstop. So sure, he led the league in errors. Yes, I agree with him 100% that he's got to be 100% focused every time he makes a play, because a lot of the errors that he made in 2025 were throwing errors where he either got lazy or tried to rush himself and just kind of let the ball get away. But that to me didn't sound like a manager who was committed to Ellie De La Cruz as his everyday shortstop. And if you want to listen to it again to see if you're hearing the same thing, feel free. But that's what I got from that, is that Terry Francona is not sold on Ellie De La Cruz being your everyday shortstop.
You mentioned Ellie maybe playing too much. Maybe some off days will do him good. You would know more about that than me. But how do you have him improve defensively? And I know it seemed like it got in his head a little bit. Is he a long-term stay at shortstop? And if he is, how do you make him more consistent defensively?
Well, that's the $100.
I took it as he was responding to, how do you make him more consistent? That's the $1 million. That's how I took it. But hey, it's open. I guess it's open to interpretation.
Well, if that's the case, then he didn't even address the question about him being at shortstop.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of just a smart workaround, and I'll have to say anything about that. But no, I agree with what he said about, how he needs to improve, and I thought he didn't trash him by also saying he needs to improve. I thought that was a good answer about that, to be honest. Yeah,
I don't think there's any question that Ellie needs to improve defensively, and we all know that. He talked about Freddie Benavidez putting in a lot of work with him, and certainly I hope that they can spend some time this offseason before spring training on that. And we saw Ellie working a lot during spring training last year on bunting. I hope we see him getting a lot of work in the infield, working on that and making the throws and just getting more comfortable with that. And I do agree with what Jim Day said there, where it felt like Ellie was in his head a lot. And the only way to overcome that is confidence. And so I hope he's just able to get the reps in that he needs this offseason and into the spring. And that come the end of March of 2025, or 2026, that we're watching Ellie De La Cruz kind of come into his own at shortstop and be the superstar that we know he can be.
Yeah, and days off. I mean, it doesn't have to be short. It doesn't have to be full days off. Like, I think you can DH Ellie, and I think that's perfectly fine. It's not going to kill the team, and it's going to help him certainly in the long run. One other interesting part of that was the praise for Freddie Benavidez. I think that's pretty cool to see, because Benavidez was not Tito's guy. Was a holdover from David Bell's spot, and I guess it's cool to see that Freddie Benavidez has reached that level of respect with Tito, a guy that I've heard nothing but great things about for his entire tenure with the Reds and Benavidez. So it's another interesting part of that.
Yeah. I don't remember hearing him say anything similar about Derek Johnson. Not that he was specifically asked about it on this podcast, but I don't remember him going out of his way to acknowledge Derek Johnson and this pitching staff at any point. Anyway, speaking of coaching staff, Nick, Reds have a new member of their coaching staff. J.R. House has departed, and he heads to the Arizona Diamondbacks. We found out on Wednesday, I believe, Willie Harris will be taking the role of third base coach for the Reds in 2026. What did Francona have to say about Harris?
Yeah, Willie Harris is going to be our third base coach. Willie was a major league third base coach with the Cubs. Things happen. He takes an A-ball manager's job with us, and I think it impressed everybody. Like, nothing was too small for him. And he even went out and scouted the Dodgers before that series. So his energy, his enthusiasm, I think will fit right in. He's going to be fine. We also hired Bill Hasselman, who I've known, and he's also going to be a really positive addition to our staff.
Pretty interesting. The Dodgers, he was scouting the Dodgers. I guess by the end of the season, he had made such an impression on the organization. Obviously, after Daytona season ended, sounds like they were using him in some additional roles. So it doesn't sound like necessarily this was something that they just decided last minute. It seems like as probably the season was going on, hey, we like this guy, we need to get him into a bigger role. And then House leaves, and there was kind of a perfect opening for him. So it's cool to see that. It sounds like he pushed his way through the organization, and this spot was how I took that.
Yeah, it sounded like he didn't give the Reds an option but to promote him. And, with the departure of J.R. House, an opportunity to reward the hard work. And look, Tito kind of acknowledged it there. I know a lot of Cubs fans grew aggravated with Willie Harris over the course of his time as the third base coach in Chicago. We similarly got frustrated with J.R. House. So I'm going to go into this with an open mind, but I do believe that position is pretty important and can earn you runs, but can also cost you runs. And I guess we'll give Willie his due, but certainly hope that we're past the days of multiple terrible sends that don't make a lot of sense. But I wish nothing but the best for Willie Harris, and certainly happy for him to get the opportunity to be back on a major league coaching staff and with the Reds.
I don't know if you, Craig, remember the 1 year of Steve Smith in 2014, but there will never be a worse third base coach than Mr. Steve Smith.
How do you remember this stuff? Your brain is crazy, dude. Yeah, no, I admittedly do not remember the 1 year of Steve Smith as our third base coach. So
there's a reason it was 1 year.
Yeah. Interesting too. We obviously didn't spend as much time on it, but Bill Hasselman coming in as a catcher's coach was with Tito back in Boston in the early to mid 2000s. Tito kind of mentioned there that he's known him for a long time. So hopefully that'll be a positive for Tyler Stevenson's continued development and Jose Trevino as well. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll hear from our sponsors, and then when we come back, Reds Hall of Fame news, Arizona Fall League news, plus does this 1-for-1 trade for Hunter Greene make sense? We'll talk about it after the break.
Deep South Commodities is a proud supporter of Chatterbox Reds and our Deep Drive of the Day, and DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks as always to our friends at DSC. And we also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay.
All right, Nick. On Thursday, the Reds Hall of Fame announced their modern player finalists. 8 names for the Reds Hall of Fame. Those names: Homer Bailey, Francisco Cordero, Zach Cozart, Aaron Harang, Mike Leake, Brandon Phillips, Scott Rowland, and Edinson Volquez. Fan voting makes up a third of the ballot and is live now through November 27th. Make sure you visit redsmuseum.org to place your votes. Nick, who's getting your vote?
Two players I think are probably should for sure be in out of that group, and that's Brandon Phillips, obviously, and I think Aaron Harang. I think Aaron Harang is one of the most underrated pitchers. Don't look at his ERA. ERA is a bad stat for Aaron Harang because he pitched a large portion of his career in the steroid era, and gets a big bonus for that. I think he's in the top 20 all time in wins above replacement according to Fangraphs. But had a terrific career with the Reds and should be in. Honestly, Craig, all 8 of those guys had pretty good careers with the Reds. I'm not going to say who because the last time I did, one of their family members came after me. But there's 2 players that have been added to the Reds Hall of Fame in the last, 15, 20 years that all 8 of those guys are better than. So Reds Hall of Fame is a weird thing where it's a popularity vote. But Mike Leake, I think, Craig, had a very underrated Reds career. I was looking at some of his numbers, very sneaky career. Scott Rowland obviously was a big part of the 2010 team and put up monster numbers in 2010 and 2011. I don't think that's enough to get him in the Reds Hall of Fame, but had a great 2-year run. Zach Cozart is close based on, well, there's no real line in the sand of the Reds Hall of Fame, but he's probably close. Bailey, I would love to get. I think Bailey was underrated. He just didn't put up the overall numbers, but obviously the accomplishments of 2 no-hitters and pitched, I think, the greatest pitching performance ever by a Red in a playoff game, that game 3 in 2012. And then Edinson Volquez, one of my all-time favorite Reds. I loved Edinson Volquez. Obviously, you can't put him in the Hall of Fame, but man, that one run he had when he was an all-star, he was incredible, and I think a lot of people forget that.
It's fun getting to this age, Nick, where we know every player on this list, and you're probably different than I am because you're a little bit wired differently, I guess is the nice way to put it. But there was a period of time, especially when I was younger, where like I didn't know the Reds history, right? So I didn't know a lot of the players that were in these conversations, or didn't get to watch a lot of them. But I specifically remember watching all 8 of these guys, and like, for someone our age, thinking about our kind of childhood and our memories of this team, like these are guys that absolutely stood out. And there's zero doubt in my mind that dude will be in. I think that's a surefire 100%. Brandon Phillips is a Reds Hall of Famer and will be in 2026. The question from there is who else, if anybody. I appreciate the Aaron Harang thought process. I think Homer Bailey and his no-hitters and his performance in the playoffs, like you mentioned, probably moves him ahead of Aaron Harang in the eyes of the voters, of the fan vote, because I think a lot of fans are going to remember the Homer Bailey performances more than the overall body of work for Bailey or for Harang. And so I think Bailey's those 3 starts alone will probably earn him significant fan vote. Now, whether or not the other pieces of the voting go Homer Bailey's way or not, I don't know. But I do think, as you mentioned, there's a case to be had for all 8 of these, one way or another, to be a member. But I think realistically, those are probably my top 3. Is that dude, and then Aaron Harang and Homer Bailey. So interested to see how that voting goes and who the next class is in the 2026 Hall of Fame.
Yeah, two get elected in. I don't know if we mentioned that. So the top 2 vote getters will get in. I don't know if there's some sort of like, if there's like a panel or something that gets extra votes or something, or if it's a completely fan vote. I don't know.
No, it's a third fan vote, a third media members, and a third alumni, like Reds alumni.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
there's a whole criteria. If you played 3 years for the team, you get a vote if you want it. Like it's not one of those things where like you have to vote, but it's open to guys to vote. So
Bailey's interesting. I think there will be some that will give a lot of stock for that. There's also a lot of people that just hated Homer Bailey too. So I'm not sure really that's that. And I forgot to mention Francisco Cordero. I mean, he had a great run. I know like at the end he was wild and it was kind of one of those closers that you always kind of held your breath. But my gosh, I mean, he was really, really good from 2008 to 2011. The closer for obviously a lot of our favorite teams in our Reds lifetime. That 2010 team had a really, really good run. And I think, Craig, I'll say this. I think Cordero, Cozart, Harang, Phillips, I think all four of those in a lot of other classes would have easily got in. And I think the two of those that don't get in are honestly kind of just had a crappy year to kind of get thrown in. I don't know if they get back on or not. But again, I always annually plea Reggie Sanders. It's an absolute joke, Reds Hall of Fame, that he's not in there. It's a joke. It's a joke. One of the Reds' best players had one of the Reds' best seasons of all time in 1995. One of your best outfielders of all time. Didn't even get a sniff at this. And there are some players that you put their numbers up next to Reggie Sanders that are in the Hall of Fame, and it's a bad look.
I think outside of the one thing I'll say about the class, and maybe you feel differently, is outside of Brandon Phillips and probably Aaron Harang, I think the peaks are really high on a lot of these guys. I don't know that the longevity is there for a lot of these guys, but again, you're talking about a specific team's Hall of Fame. It's not super common for guys to be playing their entire careers in one place, and so that's certainly part of the formula there too. Is okay, well, you mentioned Mike Leake and some of these guys who had pretty good careers with the Reds, but maybe it wasn't as long as maybe some fans would like it to be, but it is what it is, especially when you're talking about a mid-market team. Again, fan voting live now through November 27th at redsmuseum.org. You can vote there for your Hall of Fame class of 2026. All right, Nick, Arizona Fall League notes. The Arizona Fall League announced the Arizona Fall League Fall Stars game roster, which will take place Sunday at 8 p.m. on MLB Network. Fans can tune in and see a number of Reds representing in that game.
Yeah, they call it the Fall Stars game, not the All-Star game. I think those words are specific because it does not represent the players that performed the best, but the Reds obviously getting Rhett Lowder, Cam Collier, Alfredo Duno, and Leo Balcazar all in that game. So that'll be fun to get to see them in glorious HD. If you've watched any of the Arizona Fall League streams, it's not glorious HD. So this will be quite the change from the highlights that we've got to see. But a quick rundown of what the players have done out in the Arizona Fall League. Cam Collier has really slowed down, hitting just 214 now overall. Does have a good eye. 368 on base percentage, has 5 extra base hits. Leo Balcazar still hitting 310. He's got 6 doubles. Been the most impressive and probably impactful Red, and the guy that maybe has, if anyone changed their perspective, he might be added to the roster because of this. Alfredo Duno, he struggled. I mean, he's one of the youngest players out there. This should have been expected. He's just 7 for 41. It's a 171 average, but does have 10 walks and limited playing time. The guy has an incredible eye at the plate. That is, I think, a real tool when you add with his power and the fact that he could be a catcher. That gets you excited. Rhett Lowder overall, 9 innings, 9 hits, 5 runs. He has given up a pair of homers, but a nice strikeout walk rate of 8 strikeouts, just 1 walk. Trevor Kunsel, a guy that I'm really excited about, potential reliever option. He struck out 13 batters in 5 2/3 innings. Has struggled a little bit with walks, 5 walks, 4.76 ERA. And then 2 other pitchers that we were excited about seeing, Hunter Parks and Luke Hayden. We have not really seen them at all in the last couple of weeks. They haven't pitched. I'm not sure if they're dealing with injuries or if they just look so rough that they just haven't got a chance to pitch again.
Yeah, again, Rhett Lowder, Cam Collier, Alfredo Duno, and Leo Balcazar named to the Fall Stars game. I don't know if you said this. I apologize if I tuned you out for a second, but Rhett Lowder, it's been announced, won't actually pitch in the game. He was named to the roster but will not pitch. So we'll keep an eye out for Collier, Duno, and Balcazar to represent the Reds in the Fall Star games. Again, that is Sunday at 8 p.m. on MLB Network. Nick, earlier on Thursday, Arizona Diamondbacks writer for D-backs on SI, Jack Summers, proposed a interesting trade between the Reds and the Diamondbacks on foul territory. Interested your opinion here. I know you've been going at it on X.com with a couple of people about this, but proposed trade Hunter Greene for Ketel Marte. I know how you feel about it already because I've seen you type it about for the last couple hours, but for those of you that haven't seen, Nick, why don't you fill people in on your opinion on this trade for with the D-backs?
This was a really interesting trade idea, and I think of all the trade proposals I've seen, makes the most sense when you're talking one player for Hunter Greene. I clearly there is a massive misunderstanding about how good Ketel Marte is as a player in the Reds fan base, and honestly, there might in Arizona be a massive misunderstanding how good of a pitcher Hunter Greene is. I think I would want just a little bit more. Ketel Marte still owed, I think, over $90 million. That's still a friendly contract. That's a much better deal than he would get signed if he was it's a much more favorable deal than if he got signed this offseason. If he was a free agent, I think he'd be pushing maybe $300 million. He's 32, so maybe it's in the 200s, but it'd be at least double, I think, what he's making. This guy's been a top 15 position player in the sport the last 3 years, has been very, very consistent. This would make a lot of sense for me. I think I would want something in addition. I think I'd probably, because of the salary difference, I think I'd want maybe like a pitching prospect with it. But if the Reds are trading Hunter Greene and the Diamondbacks are willing to do this and the Reds are dead set, we're trading Hunter Greene, this to me seems like it would make a lot of sense. Now, I'd prefer just go sign Kyle Schwarber and keep Hunter Greene. Like that would be my preferred path. But if that's not an option and you're trading Hunter Greene, I don't know if there's going to be an offer, if it was to happen, that would be better than this.
Yeah, I think the thing that concerns me is not necessarily the contract for Ketel Marte, but the fact that, as you mentioned, he's already 32 years old. Obviously, he's coming off the best 4-year stretch of his career. 4 years that he's been very good, but he's due to make 16 million this year, 12 million next year, but then it jumps up to 20, 22, 22 in 2020 in 2030. And then he has a player option for 11.5 in 2031 when he'll be 37 years old. So my biggest concern, Nick, is just age and what that will do for him long term. Obviously, similar concerns for Schwarber, but the wear and tear on Schwarber is significantly less as a DH than it would be on Marte as an everyday second baseman. And then my other question for you, Nick, is as with somebody like yourself who's high on Matt McLain, if you were to deal for Ketel Marte, where does Matt McLain fit into your formula moving forward for the Reds if you do go out and get Marte?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very high on Matt McLain, and I believe in Matt McLain, but you get a chance to pick up Ketel Marte, you find a way to make it work. That's how I look at it. He's the kind of player that figure it out. Like this would be a bona fide superstar. I saw I had some conversations about him and Jose Ramirez, and I'm like, he's just about as good of a player. He's actually been a better hitter than Jose Ramirez, who I think a lot of Reds fans resonate more because he plays in the same state. You see him, when the coveted Ohio Cup. Ketel Marte's been really good. He's younger than Jose Ramirez, too. He's a year younger than Jose Ramirez. But he just put up his best expected weighted on base season of his entire career at a 400 mark, one of the best in the sport. So he hasn't really shown any signs of slowing down. I don't think you'd get the same production all the way through his age 37 season. But I don't think there's any reason to believe the next couple of years he's not still going to be an all-star level player. So for me, if you got him, you're creative. You maybe play Ke'Bryan at third, Elliott short, McLean at second and Cattell at DH one day. Then another day, you give Cabrian a day off. You move maybe Ellie over to third, McLean at short, Marte at second. You put Ellie at DH. You move McLean over to short. And you do that until someone gets hurt, and then you have enough players. So I wouldn't really worry about that. It would give you protection. There's also the possibility you could move Matt McLean to center field. That was a conversation you might remember this time last year that we're talking about when he was in the Arizona Fall League, him playing center field. I don't necessarily think I would do that just because I think that there's enough injury risk with Cabrian and McLean that just kind of keep them and have an extra infielder if you have one. And if you get Marte, you're not going out and getting a DH. So you can just use Ellie or Marte at DH too. So this is the kind of move that, yes, I believe in Matt McLean, but you make it work.
Yeah, Marte has played multiple positions, obviously, primarily at second base, especially recently 700 career games there at second base. He's also played 271 at shortstop, 168 in center field, and he's DH'd 87 times. So there's some flexibility there, and obviously Tito isn't afraid to put guys in positions that maybe they're not super comfortable with, and maybe at 6 foot, maybe Marte is an option at first base over Spencer Steer and his smaller frame, I guess, if you're looking to add some width and some stretch there at first base. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I'm with you though. I don't think straight up it makes a ton of sense. I just think that the pitching market is a little bit hotter than finding a shortstop. A lot harder, at least in my eyes, to replace Hunter Greene than it would be to replace a Cattell Marte. So I do think I'd be looking for something a little bit in addition to that. But like you said at the beginning of this, realistically, let's go sign Kyle Schwarber and keep Hunter Greene and not have to worry about any of it. It's not going to happen, but that would be a much better solution than trading away Hunter Greene for Marte. But we'll see what the Reds decide to do. Obviously, the offseason is underway officially. Not a ton of big announcements on Thursday in terms of free agency, but we'll certainly keep our eyes and ears peeled as the offseason progresses. General manager meetings again, November 10th through the 13th there in Las Vegas. Rule 5 protection deadline. We mentioned earlier that the Reds added Jose Franco to the 40-man. They have to add any other Rule 5 eligible players to their 40-man roster by November 18th. And then November 21st is the non-tender deadline for any players for contracts that are pre-arbitration or arbitration eligible. So lots of news and content still to come your way this offseason and even throughout this month. And as always, Nick and I will be here to take you through that. Chatterbox Sports has you covered for all the Cincinnati sports news, whether it be the Bengals, Reds, Bearcats, FC Cincinnati, all of it. We've got you covered. Make sure you subscribe, like this video if you haven't already, please. It does help us a lot. Leave a comment. If you're listening on podcast version, leave us a 5-star review, and we certainly appreciate your support. Nick, any final thoughts?
No. Off season's here. Let's roll through it. I think it's gonna be a fun off season. I think the Reds are gonna make some interesting moves. I'm waiting to see what it is.
Okay, Flying Line podcast previewing the game 3 of the MLS playoffs against the Columbus Crew is live now on YouTube. Make sure you check that out as well. And for Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Reds. We appreciate you, and we will see you next time.
Go Reds.